We're going to go over the critical thinking skills activity that we were broken into two parts. And so part one and part two, so that's what you're looking at here on the left and then on the right. So this would be the one that you submitted on Tuesday, and here is the other one that's part two. So basically it's the same worksheet, just front and back. So if we take a look at it a little closer here, and we'll just go in here, this is the chart you're supposed to basically use to answer all the questions that are posed to you. So let's get started. So the first question asks you, were all the states eager to ratify the Constitution? Explain your answer. Well, the short of it is, if we look back at this chart, there's many different answers that say no, not all states were eager to ratify this Constitution. First of all, they tell you that very much some of these are basically by a slim margin. Then they also show you other ones that go into effect after a very close vote here in Virginia. You also have a close vote in New York. You have North Carolina rejecting it initially and then approving it after a Bill of Rights is promised. So the answer is no, there was not eagerness for a variety of reasons. The votes were close in several states. Other states held out because they wanted a Bill of Rights. So the answer is no, they were not all eager. Plus, the length of the chart is also supposed to give you the answer that it takes almost more than 3 years for all the states to actually adopt it. So the answer there is no, they were not all eager. So if we go to the second one, which states probably thought that the new Constitution would benefit them the most, and explain your answer? I think what they're asking is, if you look back here, they wanted you to go with Delaware, New Jersey, and Georgia. Obviously ratified it unanimously, meaning there was no objections in those state legislatures. So the numbers that you see here, 46 to 23, 89 to 79, 30 to 27, that would mean that in their state legislatures, how they voted, that's the way the votes came down. So in these states obviously were eager to ratify it because there was no objection. So to answer that question again, which states probably thought? They would be these three states, and if you look, now I know you probably don't understand, but Delaware, New Jersey, and Georgia were small populated states at the time of the adoption of the Constitution. The last question here on the first page says, what's the major reason for resistance to ratification, and why would this have been so? Well, the major thing that you keep seeing is that the idea of the Bill of Rights not being part of it was the one stop sign, the one bump in the road to ratification in several of these states. So basically, you can sort of see it here because of a lack of Bill of Rights. North Carolina ratifies it after a draft of the Bill of Rights. Same thing with Rhode Island. So to answer this last question, the major reason for resistance is the lack of Bill of Rights, and then the promise of it is what got them to approve it at the end. Number 4 says, is the following a reasonable generalization? There was great resistance to the Constitution even in many states where it was ratified. Explain your answer. What they're asking you is, do you agree with that statement? Is it a reasonable statement? And I would say, yes it is. The reason for that, let's take a look. So even in the states where it was ratified, it was not too many states, only 3 of them ratified it unanimously. Pennsylvania, it was not overly close, but in certain states like Virginia and New York, it was very close. So yes, there was resistance. There's resistance in North Carolina, there's resistance in Rhode Island. So the idea is, you can sort of see that there was resistance due to the issue of the Bill of Rights not being part of it. The last question, in addition to the Bill of Rights, why do you think Rhode Island finally ratified the Constitution when it did? Well, you have to look at the chart. The reason Rhode Island ratifies it is that way back here in June of 1788, when New Hampshire ratified it, it became the new law of the land. And so within the next year, almost 6 months, by 1789, the president is sworn in, we have our first Congress, there's a creation of the courts, things are moving forward. So to ask the question, why did they finally join it? Well, they could sort of see that this United States was moving forward and they did not want to be left behind. So Rhode Island finally ratified it almost a year after President Washington was actually inaugurated. In general, which region was the first states to ratify the Constitution? Students here in class had some issues because they went with the Northeast. Now, typically, you tend to think of yourself being here in Pennsylvania in the Northeast if there's a opposite of the Southeast. But if they give you the option of the Mid-Atlantic, folks, you live in the Mid-Atlantic states. Now, back in the days when they taught geography, we learned that we lived in the Mid-Atlantic states. It's us, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and New York. Well, if we look at the chart, folks, take a look at the first two states that ratify the Constitution. Basically, Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. So, right there, we get the sense that it is the Mid-Atlantic states. So, that's the answer for number 1. Number 2, why was the state that ratified the Constitution after South Carolina important? Well, if you look, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The state that ratifies it next, the answer here is B. The Constitution went into effect when the next state ratified it, and that was the 9 states that were needed. Number 3, why did North Carolina reconsider its rejection of the Constitution? And the answer would be C. Its fears about personal rights were eased because they promised to add a Bill of Rights. And finally, number 4, the new Constitution went into effect after 9 states. Why would it have been a problem if the other 4 states remained outside of the Union? So if we look at the chart, okay, look at the chart. The idea, if you look at this chart and see which states still remain outside, the answer is, so you see Virginia, New York, North Carolina, Rhode Island. So let's go back to it. The answer would be A. Virginia and New York, 2 of the largest states of the 13, would still have been outside this new country. So there you go. Those are the answers. You can just double check your answers on this one. So it goes with Rhode Island is H, the last state to ratify. Number 2, the Enlightenment is D, that movement that spread ideas of knowledge, reason, and science could improve society. Number 3 is K. That's down there. The English philosopher believed that all people have the right to life, liberty, and property. Number 4 is E, the first state to ratify. Number 5 is Federalist. That would be letter B, supporters of the new Constitution. Number 6 is G, that protects individual freedoms, the Bill of Rights. Number 7, A, lawmaking branch that makes up the House and the Senate. Number 8 is I, headed by the President, Vice President, and his cabinet. Number 9 is letter C, the special group responsible for electing the President and Vice President. Number 10 is F, the court system that includes the Supreme Court. Number 11, Supreme Court, is letter L. Here's cases involving the Constitution. And number 12 is J. It is a power of the President to reject a bill or... Number 13, I'm not going to go over here because if you look to my next slide, you already did this on the previous checks and balances. So here we see what the question's asking. What powers did the federal and state government gain under the Constitution? Well, you can look right here and stop the presentation and look. Lots of examples there. So, going back, what are the differences in the opinions of Federalists and Anti-Federalists regarding the Constitution? I covered that in a previous screencast, but pretty much since you did your Ed puzzle, you have the answers to that one. So there we are.